Armed conflict has been with us since the dawn of civilization. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of armies as far back as 10,000 BC. Military history has always existed on a grand scale, with legendary battles fought on land, sea, and air. From ancient daggers to modern medals of honor, in expert hands, these relics reveal the stories of those who are no longer here to speak for themselves. Join us as we unlock the secrets of Militaria. Today on Militaria, we look at a pair of pilot's goggles, a Kisbee ring, and a deadly commando knife. Mark inspects a pair of pilot's goggles from the Second World War.
There was a level of protection also to make sure that they could actually see and be protected from environment, even the glass or whatever else flying around their cockpit.
Jennifer and Lisa dive into the history of a Kisbee ring from the HMCS Micmac.
1947, the Micmac had a terrible accident, a head-on collision with a tanker, the SS Yarmouth County.
Julie shares the intriguing history of a commando knife belonging to a Navy veteran.
Fairbairn and Sykes made it to Britain. They were recruited almost immediately to go back into the British military because their reputation preceded them from the Shanghai police. Fairbairn felt that they also really needed a weapon to go along with that, which is why he and Sykes designed the Fairbairn-Sykes knife.
My name is Christopher Joseph Martin. I work for Graybar doing electrical sales, and I brought in Lever's pilot goggles. When I found the goggles, I didn't know what they were. And there were thick lens that's on them. I started looking around to see if there was any brand or anything that was on them, because goggles bring up a lot of searches.
As the First World War waned, Britain's Royal Air Force took flight in 1918, rapidly evolving into a crucial arm of the nation's defence. By the end of World War II, RAF personnel numbered 963,000, including the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, marking a significant contribution to Britain's military might. Integral to every RAF pilot's gear were their goggles, essential for maintaining clear vision during dogfights and high-altitude reconnaissance missions. The 1943 Mark 8 RAF goggles hold their own unique story after the war, and have found a new life and interest among motorcycle enthusiasts. Their durability and iconic design made them a popular choice for bikers. The Mark 8 goggles became a bridge between military history and post-war life.
So Chris, welcome to Militaria, and you brought an interesting item today, that's something that's fairly unique and in obviously very good condition. So what do we have here?
It's a pair of British pilot goggles used in the war, and I think they were from the 40s.
Evolution of flying goggles really starts World War I, where we're seeing the introduction of single glass lenses being created. As planes evolved, technology improved, like glass production, so optics were better, curvature of the optics, being able to actually mold the glass in different layers. So towards the end of the war, we started to see that, and then ultimately in today's environment, we see face shields, full face masks evolved that actually are part of the helmets.
The two gentlemen on Marketplace had a couple of boxes of just miscellaneous tools and parts, and I got home, I was going through, and that's when I found these. As I went further, I found the two lenses. They were in decent shape compared to everything that I saw online, the leather especially in the back.
Design, patents, probably 1936, and then they refined the item throughout the war. So Lever is the manufacturer of this particular one.
I found the Lever's name and then do a little history on what they were and where they were for and how they were used, sort of the dates they were from. And as well as I saw a lot of older photos of the same, but they were in horrible shape. And that's why I realized how great a shape that these were in, especially the leather, that it didn't dry and crack.
Standard issue RAF flying goggles, basically RAF, RCF, that you'd find equipping any sort of aircrew 1939 to 45. The RAF, Royal Air Force, would have developed flying goggles from like 1914 on through. This would be part of a pilot's equipment. In training, they would be issued a set of these goggles, and they would present them to them as part of their kit. So there'd be a flying helmet, flying gloves, flying jackets, boots, All members of the crew of an aircraft would have a set of goggles issued. What we're looking at is part of the protection systems that they're creating. Obviously today we have helmets that have evolved and face shields that are different today. This is a rudimentary attempt to create something, try to standardize it and use production-wise to pump them out. I mean, they pumped out thousands of these. Once wartime situation came along, all of a sudden, well, if we're going to use goggles, we need to increase the protection. So once you've established you've got a helmet, flying helmet on, which gives you your radio signals, you need something to protect your eyes, and that's where the development came for the RAF. What's interesting with these is the particular angle of the contour. Obviously, they couldn't mold the glass at this particular point to that convex shape. So what they've done is they basically have butted two pieces of glass to do it. Ultimately, this would disappear in later versions of it.
Then I noticed that they were tinted, so I thought they may be maybe for the sun, just like another set of lenses to change if it's too bright, like sunglasses or...
They're inserts that actually insert in the goggles. I think there's a lot of glare or whatever, but sometimes they would wear them at night also because, again, reflection and various things to get their eyes to a certain level. You can imagine changing out the lenses and the goggles when you're actually trying to fly a plane isn't really the most practical affair. So in most cases, they would have just stayed with the clear lenses and gone with that way. Again, an element of protection that we're looking at with the glasses, they're also quite thick, so there's an element of protection with them. In the way that they're beveled, certainly we're seeing early development of optics and glass. Probably date these, as I said, probably mid-1942, 43, and fairly standard. The thing about these is that they're virtually unworn and they're in very good condition. Again, the leather is particularly good. You know, the optics, the glass is certainly machined differently. Its ability to be able to see, because if you're flying a plane and you've got people shooting at you, you want to see them. The goggles evolved from when pilots were flying open biplanes and various things like that. Once you got into an enclosed canopy or an enclosed aircraft, you wouldn't necessarily need the goggles, but a lot of the pilots did wear them, again, for protection, because splinters at their plexiglass got hit, they could get splinters, injured just from flying glass, and also fire. So they would tend to wear them all the time, wear them even inside an enclosed cockpit.
Also, who else used them was race cars. Back, I think it was the Le Mans that I seen that they wore those as well.
You know, they were quite coveted, and you'd often see pictures of pilots once they got to England and places like that actually driving their motorbikes and their cars, open-top cars, with these goggles on too. You got lucky with the goggles. You found them in a box of other stuff, so they found you kind of miraculously then. Yeah. What's the plan now? What do you want to do with them? What's your ideas now?
Maybe to sell them.
Yes, I mean, they're a great example, and you've got both sets of lenses with it. The condition obviously is mint. The unfortunate thing is you don't have the box. If you had the box, it would really add the difference, but they're probably worth, off the top of my head, probably $250 to $300. But having said that, given the condition, the fact that the leather is particularly fine, the paintwork's not chipped or anything like that, maybe you'll find a buyer that's motivated to do it that way. It's great that you were able to bring it and show it to us. And I'd like to thank you for bringing them along for everyone to see. And again, just by nature of such good quality and how well preserved they are over the course of 80 years.
Well, thanks for having me.
We were lucky to see such a pair of goggles in such great shape. And I think the testament is the fact that they are a very great example of World War II RAF, RCF flying goggles.
Coming up on Militaria.
The Micmac had a terrible accident, a head-on collision with a tanker, the SS Yarmouth County.
My name is Lisa McNiven, and I'm an archivist at the Naval Museum of Halifax. The Kisbee ring represents the service of the ship. It also represents coming of age for a Canadian and their identity. With the image of the maple leaf, it's a beginning of a new era of identification and who we are as Canadians.
The HMCS Micmac, a tribal-class destroyer and the first of its kind built in Canada, stands as a significant vessel in the Royal Canadian Navy's history. Commissioned in Halifax in September 1945, HMCS Micmac symbolised Canada's growing naval capabilities in the post-World War II era. Its story is marked by both triumph and tragedy, including a devastating collision in 1947 that resulted in the loss of 11 crew members and a civilian, and injuries to 27 others. After extensive repairs and a conversion to a destroyer escort, HMCS Micmac resumed service in 1953, playing an active role in training, NATO exercises, and naval diplomacy for a decade before being decommissioned in 1964.
Hello, Jennifer.
Hi.
Welcome to Militaria. What have you brought in for us to see today? What is this?
This artifact is a life-saving ring called a Kisbee ring. It belonged to HMCS Micmac, which was a tribal class destroyer, built just near the end of the Second World War in 1945. What I love about the Micmac Kisbee ring is that it represents a piece of RCN history that we usually don't talk about. We are so typically talking about the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, and so on. And so I find a lot of naval history is based around wartime. So this interwartime period is still unique, still worth talking about, and the Micmac is a wonderful example of a ship in service between the years of war.
This looks like a life-saving ring. Is that the capacity it would have been used as?
Absolutely. All ships would have been outfitted with Kisbee rings. This Kisbee ring is a wonderful example of the rings at the time at the end of the Second World War. It is made of actually cork and not plastic, and so it is quite heavy, but it is buoyant. And this rope around the Kisbee ring was meant to be that it was able to grab it when it was thrown into the water to someone who needed to be rescued, but also use it to hook it to drag the person back to the ship.
Can you tell me a little bit about the beautiful writing and representation on this ring?
One of the most unique features about this Kisbee ring are the green maple leaves. They definitely stand out because for most of us, maple leaves are red to signify anything that is Canadian. So after the First World War, Canadian ships started to kind of identify themselves as Canadian. And by the Second World War, the use of the Canadian green maple leaf was used on the funnel of ships to help identify that they were Canadian vessels. During the Second World War, the Royal Canadian Navy really came into its existence. It became one of the third largest navies in the world. And the way that Canadian sailors would start to distinguish themselves is to Canadianize not only their uniforms, but their ships as well. So they started to paint green maple leaves on the funnel of their ships so that when they were on convoy duties with other Commonwealth or Allied ships, they were easily identifiable. This tradition carried on well until about the early 1960s because in 1965, when Canada got its official Canadian flag with the red maple leaf, all the ships in the Kisbee rings immediately changed to a red maple leaf. So if you see a Kisbee ring from any current Royal Canadian Navy ship, you'll see the letters are still blue, but it is a white ring with red maple leaf. When the Second World War broke out, the Canadian Navy was very small. But by 1945, we were the third largest Navy in the world, and that was a massive achievement. The Royal Canadian Navy had over 95,000 personnel, hundreds of ships, had gone on hundreds of convoys, had engaged in U-boat battles and participated on crucial missions such as D-Day. So the fact that Canadians throughout the war wanted to stand up and say, hey, I'm Canadian, was very important and very significant. It is really during the Second World War that we see that idea of a Canadian identity emerging in the Canadian Armed Forces. When the Second World War broke out, the Royal Canadian Navy was a carbon copy of the Royal Navy. Everything from the uniforms, the way the ships were structured, customs traditions, you name it. You couldn't tell us differently from the Royal Navy, and that was fine. It was a system that we grew up with as a Navy. It worked. But then when the Second World War broke out and the Canadians were called on to participate more in convoy duties, to participate with more ships and more personnel, all of a sudden you had thousands of Canadians going to sea fighting the war. And so all of a sudden these Canadians wanted to be identified as Canadians, and rightfully so. They were serving on ships with other Royal Navy officers and sailors, and they wanted to be able to distinguish themselves separately from these individuals. So in fact, mid-war around 1942, sailors started to illegally wear Canada flashes on their uniforms and start creating identification on their personal selves. Quickly, the Department of Defense recognized the importance and the need to identify our sailors as Canadians, and they did so. They officially introduced the order to change the blazons and the flashes and other symbols on the ships to help identify them as Canadian.
Can you tell me a little bit about the ship that this ring would have been on?
HMCS Micmac was commissioned in September 1945 into the Royal Canadian Navy. What makes Micmac unique outside of other ships of the line at the time was that this particular ship was built in the Halifax dockyard. It was the largest ship to be built in Canada during the war. It was a tribal class destroyer, where other ships of the line that were tribal class destroyer had been built in England. And so Micmac from the get-go was a special ship because it was Canadian built, manned by Canadian sailors. When the day of the commissioning happened, everyone envisioned a very bright future for the Micmac. and the service that the ship would have. So shortly after its commissioning, it went down to Bermuda for workups, a few exercises, but then unfortunately in the summer of July 1947, the Micmac was chugging into the Halifax harbor at about a speed of 25 knots. At the time, there was heavy sea fog, and if you grew up in the Maritimes, you understand what I mean. That it was thick as soup, you can't see through that stuff. And unfortunately, the tanker SS Yarmouth County was coming towards them, and by the time the fog had cleared and see that they were going to collide with them, it was unavoidable. They couldn't turn the ship fast enough to avoid the collision. At the point that the collision happened, there was a lot going on. The bow of the Micmac got smushed in. It was almost like squishing paper. So all of a sudden, there would have been a lot of loud noise and terror. And unfortunately, 5 crew members that had died, 6 went missing, presumed dead, and 27 were injured from the incident. It was quite a horrific accident. By all accounts, the Micmac could have sunk, having lost its bow, but because everyone was so well trained and disciplined, they were able to bring the ship back into port and have it repaired. Unfortunately, this accident disabled it for service in the Korean War, but that didn't change the fact that the Micmac continued to serve for another 17 years in the Royal Canadian Navy.
Jennifer, thank you so much for bringing in the Kisbee ring from HMCS Micmac and telling us about the ship's history and its service.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really glad I got to bring it in.
Post-war, HMCS Micmac sailed over 100,000 nautical miles over the course of her serving history. It highlights the long history of ships post-war and the important role it played in the rebuilding of Europe and the rest of the world after the war.
Coming up on Militaria.
Fairbairn and Sykes designed a program to train soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Fairbairn felt that they also really needed a weapon to go along with that.
My name is Jerry White. I served 31 years. I did a total of 5 NATO and UN deployments. I bought in a Fairbairn and Sykes commando fighting knife, issued to the Royal Marine Commandos and then every other Allied military that fought.
The Fairbairn Sykes commando knife, emblematic of World War II commandos, epitomizes the deadly efficiency required during covert operations such as those taken on D-Day. Forged for stealth and lethality, this knife, with its distinctive foil grip, was a critical asset for the 3rd Canadian Infantry, as well as the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion during the Juno Beach landings in June 1944. Its design, intentionally crafted to inflict fatal wounds, a symbol of the silent but deadly nature of commando warfare. This resourceful handheld weapon also found particular favour with American and Australian forces. Today, these knives hold a place in military collections and serve as a historical window into the individuals who wielded them, commemorating their bravery and sacrifice.
Welcome to Militaria, Jerry. Can you tell me what you brought in for us today?
Sure I can. What I have here is called a Fairbairn and Sykes commando fighting knife, designed by 2 officers with Shanghai Police named Fairbairn and Anthony Sykes. This is one of the original units. They were issued to the Royal Marine Commandos, Special Service Force, anybody that needed to do business without making too much noise, essentially. They have a very original, very Second World War looking sheath that comes with them.
Can you tell me how you came across this knife?
I deployed a few times with the United Nations, did that unique training with some unique people. The British, like Canada, the British send their very best. And one of them, I don't know if he thought I was a good boss or if I was professional or maybe I was making too much noise, I don't know. But he gave me that my 2nd month there and said, here, I hope you never need it, but if you do, does it ever work well? The beauty of it is its simplicity. It is 4 simple components. It is a stamped blade, a stamped guard or tang, a nut, and a knurled handle. And if you throw it any way you want, it will hit point first. And if you need to dispatch an enemy quickly, quietly, it is what you want to have.
Your knife is quite beautiful. That's made probably after 1942. Wilkinson's sword was the first makers of the knife, designed by Fairbairn and his friend Eric Sykes. They were giving them out to a lot of different soldiers. It was definitely there when we landed on Normandy, on Juno Beach. The Canadians had them. This is actually sort of the 3rd iteration, made after 1942. And they've changed to this ribbed grip away from the knurled grip that they had before. The guard has gotten a little bit thinner. It's all in an effort to save on brass.
Yep.
During the war, everything gets rationed, and that includes includes precious metals. Per first pattern here, the grip is solid brass, but by the time we get down there, the ribbed pattern saves just a little, but when you're making tens of thousands of knives, that definitely adds up to a lot of brass they're saving. So
We needed the brass for shells.
made to be held in this position. He's modeled it after a sword grip so that you easily can hold onto it and you easily can move it around. Highly polished, because Fairbairn felt that if you were coming up on a soldier and you had this really polished knife and it would flash and scare them. The Fairbairn Sykes was distributed to other companies so that they could make them quickly and easily and get them out to a number of soldiers. So Canadians for sure had them. Americans, Australians, even Indian soldiers, they were really quite popular.
Every Marine, every British soldier that walked the 86 kilometers across the landing point to the combat point in the Falkland Islands all had one of these with them.
You can see the guard is different on the first pattern. It's got this lovely little S-shaped guard. The second pattern, they flatten it out. It's just easier, faster to make. The grip is still brass, but it's a little bit thinner, a little bit more elegant. And they continue making the second pattern. They start by bluing the grip and the guard, just so that when you're trying to sneak up on someone, it's not actually flashing in the light.
Bingo.
It's very intimidating. Fairbairn is actually a pretty interesting guy. He joins the Royal Militia at age 15. He's fudged his age on their certificate to say he's 18, and he goes off and fights in South Asia, where he decides to stay after he's done there, and he joins the Shanghai Police, where he learns a lot. He studies judo and other martial arts. He's patrolling the international area in Shanghai, which is a very international city at this point in time. It's quite violent. It's full of gangs and things like that. They do a lot of street fighting, where he's learning to be prepared, learning how to judge his opponent, learning everything he needs to know about what it takes to do hand-to-hand combat. And he does that for 30 years. He serves with his friend, Eric Sykes, for a long time. They move up the ranks together. When they finally decide to retire, the British says, "We want you back. We want you to start training our fighters in this street fighting." So that's what he does. He and Eric Sykes design the Fairbairn Sykes knife in 1940. Fairbairn was really an interesting man, and he truly believed that protecting yourself was important for soldiers and for police officers and anybody that would actually be in hand-to-hand combat. So that's why he felt so passionately about training, practice, making sure you had the right equipment, making sure you understood what you had to do and where sort of the vulnerable parts on another person are. And he learned that street fighting in the gutters of Shanghai, and he was actually covered in a number of scars from his time there. I mean, they still make them today. The design is just that good.
Yep, and simple.
Yeah, and in the beginning, they're all hand ground all the way up into the third pattern, but the edges are meant to be sharp, and they're meant to come to a needle point so that it just quickly and easily can pierce through webbing, through a uniform, and then through your skin.
These are shiny, and they're honed, and they're ground, and they're machined, and they're everything else. And that's why they look so beautiful. This is just all business. Not designed to be pretty, just designed to do a job. And in the hands of somebody who's trained in how to use it, does the job very effectively.
So these knives are as popular today as they were during the Second World War. There's many sort of tweaks of design, but there's still, even Wilkinson Swords still manufactures the Fairbairn sights. Collectors really like them because they are so beautiful, so easy to get around. They kind of live in infamy. They have a lot of stories attached to them. They are passed down from one soldier to the next. They're just really, really fantastic in that way. Well, Jerry, thank you for bringing in such a beautiful example of such an iconic knife. It was really great to see. Can you tell me what your plans for the future of the knife are?
Sure. I use it actually as my letter opener.
I'm glad it's still getting such great use for you.
It is.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
These knives are so popular because they have a really excellent design and it's held up over time. It's really well balanced, suited for what it was made to do, and you can use it for a lot of things, as Jerry has pointed out.